All right, so keeping things moving. We're actually going to blow right through break. Crypto's a marathon. I think everybody can handle that. All right, next conversation. This one's certainly near and dear to my heart as a New York local, talking a little bit about connectivity with Senet in New York. So I'm going to welcome up Dave and Mark for our next discussion.
You got it. Thank you. There you go. You're good. All set. Let's give you your t-shirt back. That's all I'm doing. All right. How you doing, Dave?
Good, Mark. How's it going?
Not too bad. Thank you, everybody, for giving us, I think we've got, let's see, 15, 20 minutes for this discussion. So I don't have to, I guess, introduce myself. I'm Mark from the Nova team. We have Dave Kjendal here. You want to give a quick introduction, Dave?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'm Dave Kjendal. I'm the CTO and head of operations at a startup called Senet Incorporated. We're one of the founding members of the LoRa Alliance and was the first company to get FCC certification for LoRaWAN devices and gateways back in 2015 time. We provide a connectivity platform, so a core network for LoRaWAN devices, as well as a carrier-grade public network in parts of the United States.
2015. Was anybody here doing LoRaWAN in 2015? You were. Well, no, that's Steve. Yeah, Steve was doing that.
So technically at the time, it was before LoRaWAN. It was actually called LoRaMAC at the time, before the LoRa Alliance, and that actually was 2014 when we got going to get
right.
There.
Fascinating. The Helium Network and Senet have, at this point, a relatively long-standing relationship. I'm trying to remember when we first announced that we were partnering. Feels like it was at least a year ago,
yeah,
right?
At least a year ago, probably a little more, yep.
Yeah, and so for those of you who don't recall, so when the Helium Network was launched, we were building this crazy open decentralized LoRaWAN network, and immediately every single person rushed to the assumption that we were trying to put all the carriers out of business, right? So Senet is part of, I mean, how many LNSs are there? 100 plus across the world that actively build physical LoRaWAN networks and sell products and services on top of it. I'll admit that on day one, that might have been what we tried to do, right? We had intentions of just sort of blowing over the entire ecosystem. That's not what we're doing now, but I will ask a question. What was, I guess, your impression and the incumbent operator impression of what the Helium community was trying to do?
Right, and I think it actually starts before that relationship, before Helium really had embraced the LoRaWAN ecosystem. So certainly at the time, we were a bit frustrated with what was going on.
Sure.
And as Helium embraced the LoRaWAN protocol specifications and the ecosystem, we really saw this as a unique opportunity. So we see the coverage of these large countries like the United States, Australia, large parts of the world, as one that will always be challenging. And our idea from the beginning was that in order for IoT and low power wide area IoT to work, our customers and we needed to take advantage of every natural advantage that was in the ecosystem. So partnering with Helium at that point started to make more and more sense to say there's this fantastic group of people out there deploying gateways, making them available. We can provide access to our customers again, and that really is a win-win, rising tide floats all boats sort of scenario.
Yeah.
It took us a little while to get there for sure,
right.
But I think it was that observation that, again, I don't know how many gateways or hotspots there were at the time, but hundreds of thousands, almost 1 million hotspots now. Right. You have to take advantage of that in order for the ecosystem to grow.
Yeah, and so for those of you who are not familiar with how Helium and Senet work together, so today what we've built is a massive sort of combined coverage network where Senet provides an enterprise carrier-grade front end to all of the coverage that Helium is providing. We've done what's called a roaming integration to basically enable any Senet device that gets onboarded to use both the Senet core coverage and the Helium coverage at the same time. I want to talk a bit about the announcement that we made today, or that you guys made today, about the New York City use case and the growing coverage there. But before we get there, can you give us, let's say 30 seconds on how you and the executive leadership team and the engineering team at Senet became convinced that this was a network that you wanted to integrate with? Like this was something that you could use and tell your customers about.
Yeah, so I think for us, it was the observation that we made from our core network, observing what was happening in the Helium ecosystem. So with our gateways, primarily 64-channel gateways that are covering mostly utility-style deployments, we see everything. And so we were seeing a lot of the proof of coverage packets coming up, and we saw that trend increasing and increasing, where, again, it became obvious to us that the ecosystem was going to deploy certainly in areas that we had coverage, but also in areas we didn't, and in areas that augmented coverage for our customers. And I think from our earliest kind of conception of that, before we knew how dense things were in New York City, for example, that was really the opportunity. It was take a core Senet network and augment that with dense coverage and enhanced coverage from the Helium ecosystem.
Did you, and I guess, do you now have enterprises coming to you saying, we're intrigued by the idea of the Helium network, but you give us more features that we're used to? Can we marry those?
Yes. So again, it's not just the network that we offer, but the core network platform as well. And so we have a very, very rich set of, we call it OSS and BSS tools, so the operational and business support system tools that enable our customers to manage their deployments at scale. Our customers can bring their own gateways. Our customers can bring Helium hotspots if they want to, with the relationship that we have now. But the tools that we provide for visibility and control of the end devices and the gateways that they're managing as well are industry leading. So again, carrier class and a core system that is also carrier class. So very, very high uptimes and availability of the core network, and a rich set of support services that we offer them in order to make all of their operational practices successful. In addition to that, we also offer a set of services kind of early in their development arrangement to guide them through the process of how to think about device constraints and characteristics, as well as how to think about networks and network deployments, and how to think about the Helium network that may be there that they can take advantage of as well.
Right. I mean, as the coverage grows, that becomes even more important, right? Where you take an enterprise that has some idea or some number of devices in the field, but needs to know how to get from 1,000 to 10,000 or 10,000 to 100,000.
Right.
And that, for as long as LoRaWAN has been around, no one has completely nailed this yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're 100% focused on those 100,000 million device use cases and driving that and making that successful and easy to deploy and easy to use for our end customers. One of the tools that I'll mention is that when it comes to network planning, we give our customers a rich set of those tools so they can look at our network, they can look at how they augment that with their own gateways, and recently we added the ability to overlay that with the Helium coverages as well. So they can do full planning maps out there that will tell them what kind of coverage they get from us, how many hotspots are near every single one of their endpoint locations.
So cool. Yeah, so if you go to Senet's website, you can click around a bit and see it, or do you have to log into the app to see it? I'm not sure how.
So we have a public map where you can see the overlay, but if you want to get the detailed coverage of exactly how many hotspots are how close, then then you need to log in.
Awesome. So let's talk about use cases. So Senet put out a press release, I think yesterday, or was it today?
Yeah, I think it was yesterday.
Yesterday, basically talking about a growing amount of usage that you have in the New York City area with a handful of use cases relying on the Helium network. So give us a quick summary of that. Like, what was that all about?
Right, so we're really kind of talking about 3 key use cases that we wanted to highlight. There's many, many more, but 3 key ones. I'll start with the one that's been around the longest for us. So it's in food safety. A partner of ours has been instrumenting all of the food carts and food trucks in New York City with GPS locations so that the Department of Health can come and do a surprise inspection, give them a letter grade, just like they do for the fixed restaurants. We provided our carrier grade coverage for certain areas in the greater 5 boroughs for that. What was amazing to us really was that when we did the relationship with Helium, we made that integration, that we saw a huge increase in the amount of coverage and the number of connected devices that we had as those areas where the food carts and food trucks were operating grew, particularly over the COVID time period. So human patterns changed, where people were working changed, where the food carts and food trucks were going to be in the city changed as part of that.
How many food trucks and carts are there in New York City?
So right now I believe there's somewhere in the vicinity of 6,000 that are being tracked.
Fascinating. And it's just a simple GPS sensor.
It is. There's a few gotchas that the city and I guess the union for the food cart people put on top of us in terms of how much data could be collected and over what periods of the day it could be collected. So it's only allowed to be collected, I think, from like 5 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening, which is when they're typically operating. So we're not tracking anybody as they bring their food cart home.
Fascinating. And so this is a sensor deployed using the Senet device management, network management tooling.
Yep.
And then the data flows through your core wireless infrastructure, but will touch the Helium network if it has to.
Exactly, right.
Fascinating.
We've made some changes to that with that customer's approval to optimize their devices for use of the Helium network.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting.
So that was one.
All
right. So the next one I want to talk about is connected building space.
Okay.
So a lot of interest and talk around that. So we have a partner now who is again, deploying in New York City with a full suite of products for the connected building space. So water leak detection, gas leak detection, building management, temperature, humidity, the full 9 yards with that. And they're just getting started now, but again, relying heavily on the coverage that the Helium network provides because of how dense it is and the ability to reach into the buildings from what our typical carrier network was, which was really more outdoor oriented.
Yeah, you're losing your microphone, by the way. Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Because if you look at the Helium network map for Manhattan and the 5 boroughs, there's probably too much coverage, quite frankly, right? And from someone who builds networks in a traditional way like Senet, you probably look at the map and say, like, what the hell is going on here? But it does give you the benefit of getting indoor, in-building coverage and densifies the entire thing.
Right. And I guess there's two sides to that. Right. So from an economic side, too much coverage. From a use side, we love the amount of coverage that we're getting.
I mean, we're certainly happy that there's ample coverage in New York and all the other metropolitan areas.
The final use case I want to talk about is maybe the most interesting and the highest scaled one. So that's a gas safety initiative that we're working on. So this has to do with the natural gas systems in the city, Greater Long Island as well, and providing a comprehensive gas safety solution there. There's several partners that are participating in this, but this includes 3 components. So it includes the gas meter itself, it includes methane leak detectors, and it includes the gas shutoff valve. And all 3 of those are networked together as a single application so that in the event of a gas leak, the gas main is shut off. And this works even in natural disaster scenarios. So even when everybody's power goes out, all of the gas mains are flooded over, with Hurricane Sandy, with tide waters, things like that. So very, very exciting. And again, because of the challenging topography and where those gas systems are in the buildings, which is primarily at grade in the basements and challenging areas like this again is what drives the use of the network in that space.
That's fascinating. So are these sensors retrofits? Are you replacing the entire piece of hardware? How does that work?
So it varies. Okay. So certainly we're not replacing any of the physical gas main infrastructure. These are either meter bolt-ons that are going on there. The methane leak is a standalone device that doesn't exist today, except for the homeowner may have one themselves. And then the gas shutoff valve is either integrated with the meter, or it's a standalone separate entity that has a external communications model and controller associated on it.
So the use case here is that in the event of an emergency, a leak can be sensed, transmitted, and then that sensor can take a downlink and actually shut off the source.
Right, so quickly shut off the valve. And this is something that's a unique LoRaWAN solution. That's something that we can do very, very well, is reach back out and do that quick action on the device and still have the device last for 10, 15, 20 years on battery.
This is a Class A device?
So some of these are Class A devices, some of those are Class B devices. So the valve is a Class B device.
Interesting. And for those of you who don't know, Class A devices basically just fire off messages and you get a downlink inside of a transmit window on the way down. And then Class B, what's the difference there?
So Class B is actually listening to timing from the network, and it registers for a receive opportunity every so often, so that we can reach out to the device and do something to it. But that's still very low power.
Sure.
So the transmit is a high power alternative to that. In your typical LT Cat M1 device, it would need to be transmitting in order to get that downlink opportunity.
Right. Interesting. So we have your time here. All right. So with New York, if you're open for sort of sharing, generally, like, who's the buyer of the solution? You don't have to name who they are, but like the sort of class of organization or company. And then do you see these solutions being repeatable in other cities across the country?
Right. So the first 2 examples were what we call system integrators. Okay. So those may be super large system integrators or small ones that are working on it, but they're basically providing a full stack solution to the market. So in the case of the food safety, they source the devices, they source network connectivity, they have an application that they provide to the Department of Health, and they sell that completely to the Department of Health.
Okay.
In the last case, it's really a direct operation from a group of partners that are going into the utility. So sometimes as the scale gets very, very large, you're really doing more of a bespoke solution for that particular utility. They have unique requirements, and they're looking to take service directly from Senet for connectivity, directly from a hardware manufacturer for the gear themselves, and maybe they have their own IoT solutions and systems to monitor. They don't call them IoT, but gas safety solutions to monitor that. So we see those as 100% repeatable, absolutely. So that's really the goal. On the utility side, there are a few dozen natural gas utilities in the United States, all of them very large, most of them very large. So we see that as becoming regulation eventually. So required that this safety system must be deployed everywhere.
Right.
So we see that as very much repeatable. I think the other ones, absolutely, as those continue to grow, and this is always where we have been in the last couple of years in LoRaWAN, is this chicken and egg problem of is there coverage?
Right.
Or do I need to bring my own coverage?
Yeah.
And again, this is where I think the partnership brings us into a model where our customers really can follow whatever model they like. If they want to bring their own networks, they want to have Senet go build networks, they want to bring hotspots, or they want to take advantage of hotspots that are already there. All of those factors can be brought to bear to solve those different problems. And we see that happening, again, with several of our customers right now in the utility space where we have a core network, but there's areas that we don't reach, but Helium is reaching into those areas.
Do you think, so utilities have been talked about in LoRaWAN for many years as a core market. At least in the United States, have they decided that this is a fit for them generally?
So I think it's too broad to say that they've decided that LoRaWAN is the answer.
And actually, as related to that, do they care, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we care because we think it's the right fit for the use case, but do they just care about a sensor that's going to get them the data they want on a dashboard? Or are they thinking about it as, I need a LoRaWAN-based solution that does X, Y, and Z, specifically for the utilities?
So I think, so nobody wants a LoRaWAN solution because it's LoRaWAN.
Sure.
They always want it because of something else. So in the utility space, the two things that we think are very unique that LoRaWAN allows is that 20-year life cycle. So again, you're talking about meters and things like this. They're looking to replace those once every 20 years. Battery powered over that time period, coupled with the ability to do command and control to the device while still doing that. And that's very uniquely LoRaWAN. So that is what drives that decision, we think.
Yeah.
There's one other thing, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt with the rapidly changing 3GPP cellular ecosystem. So, 3G just went away.
Right.
2G burned some people before that. Everyone wonders when the next shoe is dropped. And NB-IoT is up in the air in some places. So LoRaWAN gives them a little bit more self-determinism. They can control their own destiny.
Yeah.
Certainly we want to be there for that. I know you guys want to be there for that.
We do.
But of course, they can make their own decisions as well.
Right. Okay, so what do we got here? All right, a few more minutes. So I want to end in a minute by you basically telling people how they can get access to Helium coverage through Senet. But if you could, I don't know if you can distill this down to 2 minutes, but let's try it out. Let's say who are you selling to at utilities, or who at a utility makes a decision about to deploy this? Like, what's a typical title inside the sales process?
Right. So I'll start with that, and then we'll end up with the how to get connection
That's right.
and everything else. So in the utility space, it varies by market.
Okay.
So in the water utilities, they're much smaller. The companies that are selling products, so the meter manufacturers, those guys are pitching into the water utility itself, which is a relatively small organization in most of these cases, and they're making a determination at that utility level. So maybe for 20,000 meters, 100,000 meters, something along those, it's typical. In the gas side, it's a much bigger problem. So gas utility, National Grid here has like 1.5 million subscribers, something like that, or customers.
Yeah.
So it's a much bigger organization. A change from one technology to another is a big one that needs to get buy-in from a large part of that organization, and it takes time. With some of these gas utilities, we've been in the sales process for 2.5, 3 years now.
Wow.
So it takes a long time to get there. But once you make the transition, then they're a customer for decades.
That's just so crazy. 24 months for a sales cycle. Much better you guys doing it.
Right,
than
eventually.
us. You're much better at it than we are.
Yeah. So just real quick in terms of how to take advantage of the relationship. So all of Senet's customers on our public network, whether or not you take advantage of our carrier grade infrastructure or you're just using our platform, you all have immediate access without any additional upcharges to the entire Helium network worldwide. So we have customers that have called us up and gone, hey, I've got stuff connecting in Saudi Arabia now. Where did that come from? And it's like, well, you got Helium coverage right there. So this is where it's all happening. There's a few technical details for anybody who would like to know. Please reach out to me. You can get my contact information here, and we can go through exactly what it is. But like I said, it's that simple. So sign up for public network coverage and get access to Helium. There's no difference in how you receive data from us, how you manage your devices, onboard your devices. It's all exactly the same as it is with us, prior to the Helium relationship.
That's great. And if people want to see an example of an at-scale use case that uses the Senet network with the Helium roaming interface, or roaming integration rather, the NanoThings team is in the back with their pretty fascinating printed tag for all things tracking. Highly recommend you go say hello to them.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dave.
Thanks, Mark.
Cool. Thanks for listening.